Didn't we just do one of these like yesterday, it feels like? And here we are a week later, the first full week of June. It is now June 9th already, which is crazy. I honestly feel like we just did one of these like yesterday and it was 7 days ago. So we had a great week of fishing. It is absolutely crazy what we've dealt with in terms of weather conditions. And I know I say that every time and you're probably sick and tired of hearing it. Some of you might even turn this report off because I'm mentioning weather again. That's fine, I have thick skin, not a big deal. It's just the nature of the beast. And I mention it because almost all of my guide trips this last week, and I've had a lot of them this week, it was very busy, many doubles. That topic just continues to get brought up, not just because we're dealing with it while we're out there, but people ask questions on how to deal with it, the things we do differently, how to make the most out of the day when it's blowing 30 miles an hour like we've seen today, like we saw on, Thursday. You have to deal with it if you want to get out fishing, right? And we always say that term, it's cliche, you can't catch them from the couch. Well, that's so incredibly true. You cannot catch them from the couch. It sounds blatantly obvious, but it's the truth. You just can't get them from the couch. If you can go out fishing and you want to go fishing, you have to probably deal with the conditions and the elements. It's been crazy. Wind can be our number one nemesis when we go fishing. Personally, I would take cold over strong wind. I would take rain over strong wind. I just think wind can handcuff you in so many ways. Now, the blessing in disguise the last couple of weeks, I should say the last couple of months with all the wind, is generally speaking, a lot of our fish are shallow. So you're not out on main lake structure. However, this last week, we've seen a change in that to where some of these fish are starting to move out to main lake structure. So wind starts to play a role. You have to be out and in the wind to maybe get bit. So what are some of the things you can do? You can start to look at lake maps. You can start to look at high productive potential spots where maybe you're out of the wind. You may have your favorite spot you want to fish. It might just not be able to come into play because of the wind. So pay attention to lake maps. Do your homework ahead of time. Look at some stuff. I got a northwest wind. Probably not going to fish something on the southeast side of the lake, right? Offshore. Maybe look at some offshore spots if you think that's where the fish are or where they're transitioning to on the northwest, west side of the lake. Simple things. Those guys and gals out there listening that fish Lake Mille Lacs know exactly what I'm talking about. Every day you fish Mille Lacs, you play the wind, right? You have to look at where am I going to launch? What am I going to do? Those are things you can take into account on windy days, even on smaller lakes, even on bodies of water like Minnetonka, where you can tuck in and hide out of the wind. You may just have to adapt. You've heard that word from me before in the past, especially last ice fishing season. Adapt to get on the better bite. So those are some simple things you can do to get on it. You also have some tools in your boat, possibly like spot lock, where you can utilize that to stay on spots. Drop the head of your trolling motor down further into the water so you're not getting that every time you come out of a wave. So drop down, adapt a bit, adapt the position of your trolling motor into the water if you plan to use spot lock to keep you on the spot a little better. So simple things you can do to help you catch more fish. Outside of the wind, we dealt with rain, put on a good rain suit. Again, rain does not hurt the fish, they're already wet. Oftentimes it helps the fishing. Now, when you get a storm that comes through, let's say lightning or thunder or things like that, it can be a little more difficult. You have to pay attention to those sort of things that can change the mood, the bite, all that sort of stuff. So weather is going to be a factor. It's something we're going to deal with forever. It's not going away. It's here to stay. Just get used to it. And like I said, be willing to adapt. Now, how do we catch our fish this week? Water temps are now 70 degrees. We've reached 70 degrees. It's going to be there for a while. It's not going backwards at this point. So just get used to it. Start thinking about transitioning from spring to summer patterns. That's what our bass are doing. They're moving from those shallow spawning habitats into the 6 to 10 foot weeds. We're also seeing our bass staging out on offshore structure, like I mentioned, out deep already. We caught bass as deep as 18, 20 feet this past week on Ned rigs, on jig worms, on drop shots, on things like that. So these bass are starting to transition into what I would consider the summer pattern. So over the next coming weeks, depending on the body of water you're fishing, you're going to start to see, honestly, legit summer patterns emerge for your bass fishing. Walleye, same thing. Everyone's giving me a hard time because I'm fishing a lot of walleyes and they're not used to seeing that. It's been a whole lot of fun. We caught some more yesterday. We caught some more this weekend. We caught some more on Friday. On Thursday, we caught walleyes. It's starting to teeter off a bit. That awesome, aggressive spring pattern is starting to shift into summer. I am far from an expert on how that all works. I'm hoping to learn. I'm hoping to learn maybe from some of you. I'm going to try some things. I'm going to continue to give walleyes a little bit more focus than I have in past years. But for those of you that are the bass heads that follow me, don't worry, that's going to be my main focus. Probably starting again now until, who knows, that's going to be what we're fishing for, is predominantly largemouth bass. But on some of my spare time, in between trips, maybe if I get some windows of time here and there, I'm going to experiment more with some of the walleye fishing, just see what I can figure out. I'm intrigued. Challenge accepted. So how are we catching our fish? We'll touch on the walleyes first, because I know that's what people have been really focusing on. We're catching them a variety of ways. We've caught them on leech and a bobber. That's been exceptionally well. We've caught them on some moving baits earlier in the week. As the week transitions, I've noticed that they don't want those moving baits. They don't want those sorts of things. They've been on leeches, and they're biting on, believe it or not, you've seen Brett McComas and Chris from Target Walleye mention Ned rigs a ton for walleyes. That is how we caught most of our walleyes the last 3 days, on a Ned rig. I'm being truthful. We caught them on Ned rigs. A lot of you out there think of them as a bass presentation, and they absolutely are a bass fishing cheat code. But if you follow along a lot of these walleye-driven organizations, the Target Walleyes, the Linders, the Angling Edge, Angling Buzz, if you follow along John Hoyer, if anyone follows fishing, walleye fishing, you probably know who John Hoyer is. They are really focusing on utilizing Ned rigs to catch walleyes. And Ned rigs come in a variety of different looks, feels, applications, and they just get bit. A lot of our fish in the metro, especially on Minnetonka where I've been doing most of my guiding, are in the weeds. They're relating to the weeds. They're not on offshore rock, they're not on gravel, they're not your typical Mille Lacs fish, your Leech Lake fish, your Cass Lake fish. These fish relate to the weeds. We are effectively slowing down our presentation because I can't pitch that scope TG and a paddle tail through these weeds anymore because they're really in it. If you see them on forward-facing sonar, they are just stalling out. They're not moving around on the edges like they have been for the last several weeks. They're stalling out in the cover. So now we're pitching Ned rigs at them. We have fished Ned ringers. That chartreuse head, green pumpkin body has been dynamite. Stubby little 3-inch profile. This is nothing crazy. Chartreuse head, Ned rigger, Mr. Twister body, absolutely get bit. The all-terrain Hail Mary head, thinner profile, little longer shank. I'm using, again, a modified worm paddle tail. I can let that hit the bottom. I can slowly hop it through some of the weed pockets, but again, I'm not casting and retrieving this presentation. This would be considered more of a modified Ned head, almost like a mini finesse football head. That's going to be the Hail Mary, and I'm pairing that up with a sassy swimmer from Mr. Twister. Next, you have a drop TG. You've heard me talk about the drop TG, a tungsten jig head, a little longer shank hook, modified fluke bait. That should be about 1 inch longer. We cut the head off. Now I got a little darting looking minnow. I am fishing that much like I would a Ned head. Pitch, hit the bottom, shake, little hop, shake, little hop. I am not casting and reeling this in. I am fishing this like I would a Ned head. So when I reference the Ned head and modify Ned heads, this is what we're doing to get these fish to bite. Those have been 3 very, very easy ways to catch fish. And on top of that, we have still fished the leech and bobber. I'm going to continue probably to lean on that throughout the summer months. Talking to my walleye friends that do this on a regular basis, don't give up on the leech and bobber. That's something that'll catch them all year. Fully believe it. I will continue to play with that as well. So that's been our walleye game. They've been fishing, been sitting in main lake weed points, even up in the weeds in 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 feet of water. They are relating to that cover. You're not going to oftentimes see them on side imaging or forward-facing sonar unless you slow way down and pay attention to the corridors in the weeds to see where these fish are sitting behind weed clumps, maybe a little bit of rock mix in the weeds, and like, oh boy, there's 2 fish. That's where we're seeing our walleyes. Bass, in the exact same spots as the walleyes. The bass are up against the outside dock lines. We've caught a couple under docks. That's going to get better as we move into the summer months, but a lot of bass in that 6 to 10 foot range right now. They are slowly, like we mentioned earlier, sliding out to the weed lines, and in the coming weeks, if not days, with 80 some degree air temp coming this week, they're going to position and school up on the outside weed lines. Deeper weeds are starting to form, main lake milfoil starting to come up, pond weeds starting to drop. All these things are happening right in line with what we call that spring to summer transition, and the fish are following right with them. Crappies, same thing. They're right there in those emergent weeds, right in the weed lines. You can see them schooling up. A week or 2 ago, you didn't. Now you're seeing giant balls of crappies and bluegills on your forward-facing sonar running those weed lines tight to the weed line. Very apparent, very easy to spot, and honestly, pretty darn easy to catch. You can either use a fixed float, 3-4 feet down, pitch a minnow style bait through them, something that looks like a pin minnow. That's what they're feeding on. They seem to want that pin minnow versus something that looks like an insect right now. Pin minnow, handful of feet down, fixed float, or you can pitch through them and work a bait as well on like a small little paddle tail swim bait. Either way is getting your crappies and bluegills to bite. The musky fishermen were out in full force. This is the second weekend of the opener in Minnesota. I saw a lot of them fishing this weekend. Hopefully you caught some fish and saw them. We did not encounter any muskies the last couple of days. Did see a couple in the shells, but we haven't caught any. That might change. If we do catch one, usually it's by accident. So should be another great week to fish. It looks like we're going to see some 80-degree water temp. Things are going to warm up. We do have some rain predicted. Not surprised. I'm not even looking at the wind because I'm assuming it's going to happen. The trees are just whipping right now here in the afternoon on Sunday. It's just the nature of the beast. So get out there, have some fun catching fish. I'm pumped. This is another great week to be out fishing. We'll be on Minnetonka. I'll be on the Sago chain again. I'll be on some other West Metro lakes. There's a number of things. And then when I come back at you in a week, it'll be on Father's Day. So have a great week. Hopefully you have a great rest of your weekend. There's a handful of hours left of sun here before we call it a day. And you get out there and catch some fish and set some hooks. And at the end of the day, like I've always said, be safe, be respectful, and we'll see you next time.